first of all, that Venus was one of the originally created planets in our system that were created in pairs.
Right, and it was already recognized.
And it was already recognized, say, by the Sumerians. And two, that it's true that the ancient sources speak of a celestial collision, speak of an invader from outer space that was caught into constant or perpetual orbit, but that is the planet that I call the 12th planet, and that the Sumerians called Nibiru, the Babylonians Marduk. So while he has done a lot of research and reached to some extent the same evidence, the same sources that I did, he stopped short. He had no access perhaps to the additional information, the additional sources that I had or that I had access to, and thus, in my opinion, he reached the wrong conclusion.
Did you ever have a chance to speak with him or correspond with him before he died?
I was supposed to have met him, but he was quite sick by then, and we ended up not meeting.
Okay, well, let me move on to some questions here. I personally don't rule things out of hand, as being impossible. I mean, there's a lot of things about the past we just don't know. And there are a lot of people who talk about the possible existence of 10th planets and many other things. I have, to begin with, one real great difficulty with what you're presenting. And very simply, if there's an advanced species of life, sentient life, that has adapted to living on a planet with an orbit such as you describe, I don't know how they would be able to survive on a planet such as Earth.
Why not?
Well, the conditions are so drastically different.
In what way?
You want me to point out all the ways I can think of?
By all means. Otherwise, how could I answer your question?
Well, okay. Tell me one thing. How close in does this putative planet come in its orbit?
It passes between Mars and Jupiter.
Okay. So that's its closest point. And,
right.
And the furthest point?
Well, it has an orbit of 3,600 years, so you can figure it out.
Well...
it's far out, right?
Yeah, quite. How many astronomical units are we talking about?
Well, I have calculations, but for the average listener, it's far out.
2 or 3 times the orbit of Pluto, or what?
What's the difference?
Well, okay.
It's very far out,
okay,
right?
Fine.
It's far out.
In any event, for any kind of life to adapt to changes in the radiative heat that they're receiving from the sun, for instance, that are so great between the two extremes of its orbit, I wouldn't know how to conjecture what form that type of life would take. But then to suppose that life form adapted to those extreme conditions could then successfully survive on planet Earth. Our orbit is much closer, of course, than the asteroid belt, and we have a pretty stable, fairly regular orbit. It's really kind of hard to believe.
Well, they also have a fairly regular orbit, and like us, they have a summer and a winter. When they are out there, it's winter, and when they are nearer the sun, it's summer. And as I was telling a previous caller, to them, one orbit is 1 year. So they had 6 months winter and 6 months summer, and probably some spring and autumn in between. Except that to us, one of their years is 3,600 years. To us, their orbit seems an incredible orbit, but to them, probably the orbit of the Earth looks like a minor or relatively minute orbit.
When they're out that far, they really have winter.
But they did not depend. They did not depend on heat from the sun, because the Sumerians described that planet in text and pictorially as a radiating planet, a planet that had its own heat. In the neighborhood of Jupiter radiates more heat than it gets. But you know that in the neighborhood of Jupiter, they discovered sources of heat 2.5 times stronger than the heat emanated by the sun.
Well, okay.
So the whole notion that the planet cannot have heat unless it's near the sun has been discarded by now.
Yes, I realize that. And if they're living on, if there's a life form living on such a planet with an orbit such as you describe, again, I don't see how they could successfully thrive on a planet like Earth. There had to be some, when we talk about colonizing or in any sense setting up colonies, small-scale colonies on planets out in the solar system, we talk in terms of enclosed, say dome-like structures or something. We bring our atmosphere. We create all sorts of modifications just to be able to survive, let alone thrive.
Well,
I would think that would hold in reverse.
We do that simply because the atmospheres to which we are used or that we need are either on those